Well, hi. Hey, let's take another look at a pericope, they call this, in the book of Genesis, chapter 30, the second part. The subtitle in the New International Version says, Jacob's flocks increase. I've chosen to title it Jacob's Odd Breeding Strategy, and there's been lots of question about this for years, and it sounds like some kind of superstition or mysticism or whatever, but there's actually some sound scientific stuff behind it. Let's take a look at this. Let's read the passage and then get it before us. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, that's the 11th of his children, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way, so that I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I have done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock have fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." "Agreed," Laban said. "Let it be as you have said." That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young and that were streaked or spotted or speckled. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves. He made the rest face the streaked, dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones to Jacob. In this way the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to his own large flocks, and maidservants, and menservants, and camels, and donkeys. Well, okay. It's an interesting passage, and there's been lots of speculation, lots of commentary on it, but let's get into it. Okay, so initially what we think of is this is some kind of selective breeding. And yeah, in a sense it is. Or we might think, well, it's simply the blessing of God. And yes, it is. Perhaps it's both of these things simultaneously, and maybe even some divine guidance for Jacob along the way. So what we have to start with is Jacob, in essence, goes to Laban and he said, "Time's up. Release me and mine to go home now. And the whole idea is I came here to get a wife, and I have paid the dowry. I've spent the 7 years for the one and 7 years for the second one. And by now Jacob has 4 wives and 11 children. Benjamin hasn't been born yet. So he asked permission to take his wives and his children and return back to home, Beersheba, or that southern part of Israel. He's served his time, and it's a done deal. He has fulfilled his part of the deal. And he says to Laban, you know how much I have done for you. In other words, I have given you good measure, pressed down and shaken together, and it's time for me to go. So it's obvious that Jacob's skills and diligence have made Laban very rich. And he hasn't slighted Laban in any way. He served well. In other words, he's been worth his keep in every sense of the word. Laban says to him, I have learned by divination. Oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. Well, that's a pagan kind of thing. That's not a belief in God. So the comment back in Genesis 29 was that Jacob had gone, he continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. So as we've been reviewing this series, time and again we've come to this. The code in the Bible is that anytime someone moves east, they're moving away from God. When they turn around and go west, they're going back to God. So the eastern gate in the Garden of Eden, or the eastern gate in the tabernacle or the temple, all are symbolic of the direction away from God or toward God. So the designation is that Laban was one of those who had, in essence, left God. So it's no surprise then to learn that he's using something other than God to get his information, his guidance, his support, whatever it is that he needs. And in this case, the NIV uses divination. Other translations use different words. But the Hebrew actually talks about the omens and amulets and things that they may have used for this kind of discerning the future. The definition online is that divination is the art or practice that seeks to foresee or foretell future events or discover hidden knowledge, usually by the interpretation of omens or by the aid of and then its supernatural power. But the phrase supernatural power is not the good angels or spirits, it's the demonic or evil spirits that might be involved in this, impersonating, of course, the good ones. The story in the King Saul went to the witch of Endor and had her call up the spirit of Samuel. She was used to doing this and speaking with spirits that impersonated people. On this occasion, however, the spirit of Samuel actually came, and it startled her, scared her to death. You see, she had not been speaking to the real persons that were supposed to be conjured up. These were impersonated by demons, and she was familiar with that. The internet, in addition to this definition for divination, talks about how horoscopes, astrology, crystal gazing, tarot cards, and things like that. The Ouija board is included in the kinds of things that are used in what they call divination. So it may be correct, the information that people get by these means may be correct. But there's no commitment to truth, so you can't rely on it. It may be just coincidental that it's correct. It may be correct a few times, but not always. One of the illustrations about this is Nostradamus is thought to be a world-famous ancient prophet, one who could predict the future. Well, statistically, Nostradamus was 17% right in his predictions. 17%. Now, you know, if you're guessing one way or the other, you could be 50% right. He was only 17% right. The Bible says that a true prophet of God is 100% correct. He doesn't miss. And so you can see that this is all tomfoolery. But the comment that Laban says is, the Lord has blessed me because of you. Now that is correct. But there's no honor to God in this. There's no sense that he has become a believer. It's just a coincidental statement. God has blessed me because of you. So then he says, name your wages. So, and incidentally, in the NIV, there is this statement, the phrase that is used, where Laban says to Jacob, stay with me. And I understand that that phrase is really not in the Masoretic text. It's in verse 27 here. But the implication is pretty clear that that's what Laban is suggesting to Laban. So Jacob clearly states the theme of the section here. This part of chapter 30 has a theme, second half of the chapter. And it is that God has blessed Jacob as he promised he would. And that's a theme that goes over and over in the book of Genesis, that a relationship with God results in blessing. So Jacob says to Laban, you know how I have worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? Now he has 4 wives and 11 kids. He needs some lambs that he can eat, and he needs an estate. He needs to be self-supporting. And so it's time for him to begin, in a sense, his own business. And it's a correct evaluation. Laban has no qualms, no quarrel with it. It is true he has been blessed because of Jacob's work. And Jacob's request at this point is very legitimate and right. And so Laban asks, what shall I give you? And Jacob answers, don't give me anything. Now that's exactly what Abraham had said when Abimelech had offered to give him, or the Hittite had offered to give him the cave to bury his wife. Abraham said, no, you don't give me anything. I receive everything I get from God. I will pay for what I receive from you. So again, in this passage, we see that Jacob needs nothing from man. He is depending completely on God to provide for his needs. So God would be his rewarder, just as he had promised back then. Now this is going to be kind of interesting, but here's the deal. Jacob says, if you'll do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages. And my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen. And so there's a picture of a ewe that has both a white, solid-colored lamb and a spotted one. Now, the question is going to be, because we read that the next day, Laban had said it's a deal. And the next day, so who's the he that separated the speckled and spotted? Jacob said, I will go through your flocks. And then the verse says that and it looks like Laban, actually separated the speckled and spotted and dark, and put them under the care of his own sons. That's Laban's sons are now going to be the shepherds of these speckled and spotted ones, while Jacob is going to stay with the solid-colored flock. And again, Laban puts 3 days between Jacob, makes sure that there's no mixing of these flocks. So instead of Jacob starting with some wages, he starts with 0. He starts simply by caring for Laban's flock. And all the sheep that are solid color belong to Laban. Jacob, even though he had said, let the speckled and spotted be mine, I'll separate them out, Laban took them all. There were absolutely zero left for Jacob. Okay, now, what Jacob does next has been considered superstition or mysticism. But could it be that it's sound science and real genetics, scientific genetics? So I know that this passage has come under attack, and there are lots of people that point to it as if the Bible is full of all kinds of myths and fables and so on, folklore and superstition and so on. However, there's an article online, and here's the the site to go to. And it's kind of interesting what research into botanical and herbal remedies over the past few decades, it says, have exonerated the methodologies which Jacob used. Well, really? Well, let's go back to the passage and get the facts before us. The genetics that had produced the speckled, spotted, and colored in the sheep and goats had not been culled out. The animals had, but not the genetics. So the DNA of speckled and spotted was still in the herd, the animals that Jacob was left in charge of. So it stands to reason that some speckled and spotted would be born from the solid colored animals. So Jacob simply needed to have the animals with the genetic traits of stripes or spots or mottling outbreed the single-colored coated flocks. So that to make that happen would require, in addition to time, three things. Intricate knowledge of the animal's feeding and mating behaviors. You know, every shepherd knows his sheep. They're not just all look the same. Every shepherd knows individually the sheep. He knows which ewes had dropped a speckled or a spotted lamb. So he's going to be alert to when those animals are breeding. The second thing is he needs to know about medicine that keeps the animals healthy and strong. And then the third thing is he needs an understanding of which animals had these genetic traits and needed to reproduce, that he wanted to reproduce. So let's read the passage again, verses, and here it is. When the flocks were breeding, he later says in the next chapter, third one, he says, when the flocks were breeding, I saw in a dream that the streaked, spotted, and speckled males were mating with the females. In that dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob, and I said, here am I. And he said, look up and see. All the males that are mating with the flocks are speckled, streaked, and spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. So God is involved in this, and by means of an angel, he gives Jacob some insight. And out of that insight comes the propensity to do something with it. So let's clarify this mistaken focus or this mistaken notion that it's all myths and fables. In verses 40 and 41 of this chapter in English, we have a tendency to focus on the phrase, set the faces of the flocks toward, that's King James, or before the eyes of the flock. And because we focus on those, it makes us think that it was the effect of the stripes in the branches and the animals simply looking at them that resulted in the speckling or spotted children. I grew up down in Guatemala. The Mayan Indians have a superstition that if a young lady holds a white American baby, that she will have a white child. Well, there were all kinds of things that happened as foreigners came and intermingled with the native women. White children were born, and so they created this myth, well, I held a white baby and my baby was white. Well, that's not really what happened, but there are myths and fables that take root in our understanding, and it gives us a paradigm to look through. But now, if we look at verse 38, which states that Jacob put the peel sticks in the watering trough, and the flocks bred right near those troughs. Now we need to take a deeper look and perhaps change our paradigm a little bit. So what is happening is that Jacob peeled branches. Now we have a tendency to think they're thick branches. They actually are little twigs. And those twigs have been found to cure urogenital problems. They reduce fevers. They work as anti-inflammatories and aid in reducing reproductive disorders. All of these chemicals in these twigs, and they were apparently eating the peelings as well as getting the chemicals from the twigs themselves. The chemicals would make the animals that ate them healthier. Now it says that he wouldn't put the twigs or branches in the water when the solid colored sheep were mating. He would only do it when the speckled were mating. So the sheep not only eat these twigs and peelings, but they drank the chemicals steeped in the water. And the result was that they were stronger and healthier, and all of the diseases that sheep tend to suffer from were reduced. So Jacob was simply ensuring that his critters were healthier and stronger. That's exactly what the text is saying. So ultimately, yes, it is the blessing of God. That's what's happening. But it comes with divine instruction from an angel, as well as from years of experience from someone who knows sheep very well. And so he knows about breeding, and he knows something about genetics. And so his methodology is to simply use the aid that the angel had suggested to him, as well as to depend on divine providence ultimately. So the methodology of Jacob, whether it was told by God directly, the angel, or whether he had some herbal medicine knowledge, does seem to have some potential health benefits, scientifically. And with God, quite probably increasing the fertility of the flocks. Jacob was, the flocks that Jacob was giving that Laban was giving to Jacob, the breeding program resulted in extremely increased speckled, spotted, and molted, and whatever else. Now, what we understand, and this article documents it, research into botanical and herbal remedies over the past few decades has exonerated the methodologies which Jacob used with Laban's flocks. Indeed, some of the same botanical specimens Jacob utilized are now being used to supplement livestock feed and are used as veterinarian treatments in several diseases and conditions. You know what? I have come to know and believe that the Bible is truth. It really is truth. We may not understand it, but test it. It will prove true. So we read the conclusion of this. In this way, the man, that is Jacob, grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks. It isn't mythology. It isn't just superstition. It's wisdom. It's the wisdom of truth. What a concept. May we be wise in what we do, and may we depend on God's wisdom, which is sure. Thanks for watching with me. Join us again next week. Until then, be blessed.